time for you to get off my shit!
What up, dorks? My name is Luke, also known as wafellmaker. I'm the creator of Skifters, and recently I told you guys to ask me some questions. I took the best ones, and I'm gonna answer them now. We're gonna start rattling these off because there's a freaking lot of them. I got 2 questions. What is your thought process on creating animation? Does it randomly create in your head while in the bathroom, or do you sit and take the time to create one and think about it? And do you sometimes feel overwhelmed by the amount of ideas and things you want to do, but at the same time you can't for other reasons? Also, can you give Flip a loaded gun? No, Flip will do no good with a loaded gun. What is your thought process on creating animation? I don't sit down and write a script or a story. I come up with ideas of stylistic, cool things, cool action bits or jokey bits that I want to make, and then I kind of collect them all and then write something that lets me execute them, which I'll explain. I thought it would be really cool if there was a character standing on the side of a car with their foot on the steering wheel steering it while they did something else with their hands. I didn't know what that was going to be. Hitting something, smashing something, who knows? But then I also thought, wouldn't it be cool if there was a character who had a golf club who was like deflecting bullets with it, and then they were juggling a bullet until they eventually like sent it back at the attacker. I thought that would be really cool. So then I was like, maybe they're standing on the side of the car with the golf club. Coming up with all of these little ideas before I actually have anything else. Once I have all these stylistic ideas, I thought like it would be really cool if there was a character who was having an internal monologue until, you know, it eventually gets revealed that they're speaking out loud and everybody can hear them. I thought that would be a funny bit. Once I come up with all these bits and quips and action sequences, I write a story from start to finish that kind of like ties them all together and lets me, like enables me to make a story with those moments. So I didn't come up with like skifting or like a story or like what the characters cared about before I had from start to finish all of my like stylistic beats. And then I write something to connect the stylistic beats, and that's currently Skifters. Do you sometimes feel overwhelmed with the amount of ideas and things you want to do? Not really. There's basically 2 different tracks in my brain of creativity that I kind of work in. One of them is like the mechanical side where I'm like actively working on my current project on my computer creatively. How do I make these shots work? How do I fulfill the dream of what I had laid out in my storyboards and stuff? The other lane is while I'm not working on animation, like when I'm at my regular job or I'm in the shower or I'm driving in my car, I'm coming up with new creative ideas to kind of like let all those ideas flow. So what that means is right now I'm currently writing ideas, like coming up with those stylistic beats for my next project after Skifters is done. Even though Skifters is only 1 episode in, I'm currently like laying the groundwork for the next thing, which lets me get all those creative ideas out and have like all of those creative ideas without them like derailing what I'm currently working on and going, Skifters, it's not as cool as these other ideas, and then flip-flopping. Those 2 different lanes let me get this project done and be expressive and creative in my head. Eventually, when Skifters is complete, that stuff that's in my head will be the new current project, and then I'm gonna have that other lane for the next thing as well. Basically always having 2 different creative lanes to work on 2 projects at once. Since your older projects were running around sports, bowling and tennis, this project is currently about golfing in some way, and since you talked about another project during your streams, are you planning on only creating series around sports? If so, which one? I'm not planning on making projects only about sports. Sports are a great limiter to help me be expressive and creative so far in my career. When you are an animator, you can do anything that you want. You have infinite possibilities, and having those infinite possibilities can kind of be paralyzing, because when you can do anything, you don't know where to start or when to stop or what you want to do, what's good to do, what's fun to do, because there's literally anything that you can do. Once you tie it to like a real life sport like bowling, there's a ton of limitations there. There's a ton of limitations in bowling, in that the bowler, like if you ever watch bowling, the bowling meta is like super rigid. Everyone kind of bowls a very similar way with respect to like everything else that you can do in the universe, because the sport is very simple. As a result, how do I come up with cool ideas? How do I come up with cool shots? How do I take, you know, the cool parts of bowling and the interesting parts and really like elevate them and try to like make them as expressive and bombastic and over the top as possible? That's a really tough limitation that breeds creativity. Through restriction, you will come up with creative ideas to make something as expressive and unlimited as possible, despite the fact that you're in the confines of something as rigid as a sport. So far, I've made a show show about bowling, I've made a show about tennis, I've made a show about tetherball. Currently Skifters, it has the theming of golf, but skifting in and of itself is like its own like new sport, like that's kind of like a fake fictional sport that I came up with. Skifters is kind of the testing ground for a bunch of different things. I haven't animated combat in a while, which I'm currently doing. I want to see if I enjoy that. There's a lot of color tests that I want to run with Skifters. Skifters is kind of my testing ground to see how the style and substance of my future shows are going to go. Currently, the new show that I'm working on in that other lane in my brain that we were talking about has nothing to do with sports. I don't really know if I'm going to make this show for sure until I kind of get these Skifters tests done. Once I finish Skifters, I'll be like, oh, that part that I was testing, that part sucked. It wasn't fun at all. Let's scrap this idea and let's work on something fun. So currently, no new sport in mind. We're gonna do something completely different, but I don't know if that's the way it's gonna be for sure. We'll see how the tests go. How did you come up with the concept for Skifters? And also, what was your favorite thing to design? I really like, dramatic body mechanics. Somebody throwing something really hard and fast is always going to be more fun to animate to me than like someone shooting a gun, at least so far. So when I made Skifters, I wanted to come up with a sport that was like, you know, like requiring this really like bombastically ridiculous throw. When you throw something really far, you need to get to it really fast. So what are we gonna do? We're gonna drive something like a car really quickly to get there, which is another like test that I'm running. Is like, do I like working with cars? Having the camera crush into like a car's, you know, driver's seat has been very claustrophobic and hard to work with, and it's like, do I like that? I'm finding that I'm having more fun animating April on her bike because it's so open, but she's still in this big prop, finding that really fun. Those are the kind of tests that I'm running. So I really like to designing April and her bike. To answer your question in full, I don't like modeling at all. I don't like to draw, so I don't have concept art. I don't have like character sheets. I don't do like a very complex set. There's never any buildingscape or cityscape because having extras and having like a ton of characters to model that are only on screen for a moment and having a ton of buildings to model and stuff is not fun. I don't like modeling. I like animating. So I model what I have to kind of get by, but usually when I conceptualize my ideas, they're intentionally conceptualized to be modeling light. What inspired you to become an animator? I was never really inspired to become an animator in particular. I've always wanted to make things and I've always wanted to tell cool stories. Animation was just kind of like the medium that I was in at the time. I could have very well like seen myself becoming like a filmmaker or like a comic drawer had the timing been right in my life, but at the time animation was just kind of like the most interesting medium to kind of like tell these stories and make stuff back when I got into it. So here I am. What's the origin behind the name Wafellmaker? Is it based off the breakfast? I do like waffles. Back in the day, Wafellmaker was the first like auto-generated like Xbox Live gamer tag that I was given, and it's just always stuck with me ever since. Where do you find the music and sound effects for the show? The sound effects are from a website called Artlist. It's just like a library where you can license sounds. The music is a bit more important to me. It's from a production company called Monstercat. You can essentially pay a fee to license their music for your work, which is what I currently do. It's really cool because they're still putting out a lot of awesome music that I listen to, but it's been cool to like unearth some of the songs from like my childhood and find a place for them to live as well. Has been really cool. I've been really enjoying Monstercat's like licensing service. Really like a lot of the artists under that label. Is your wife an artist too, or just your voice actor? My wife does all the voice acting for a lot of the characters and Skifters, including characters from my previous works. She's not a digital artist outside of voice acting, but she does do crocheting, which she's really into. What inspired Flip's design? I was just kind of like doodling in my storyboards to come up with like a character's face who looked cool. When I first started making Skifters, I didn't know what Flip was going to look like, and then I kind of just like kept doodling his face until one of them stuck. I knew that I wanted to, one of the tests that I'm running with Skifters again, I knew that I wanted to start to lean away from the more like traditional like anime face where it's like very iterative of Japanese anime and kind of lean in a different direction where things are a little bit more abstract. I found that while Flip looks really good, the simplicity of his face is starting to cause me trouble making him as expressive as I want him to be. He is still very expressive, but like the range of emotions like and micro expressions that I can do with him are very limited. For the future projects, I'd like to kind of find a space between like this like traditionally like Japanese inspired like face design and this like really abstract one, and try to find like a healthy middle ground and really own it for all the characters. I think that I've learned a lot from Flip and Damper's design, and we're gonna find a new kind of place to spearhead this style going forward that's somewhere in between them and everybody else. I'm really excited to see what that looks like. Do you work to support Skifters, or is it making enough to be a full-time gig? Skifters is certainly not making enough to be a full-time gig. I'm definitely cash negative over the course of my career. So I do work like a regular job in my off time to kind of like put food on the table while I make Skifters. But Skifters and all of my future shows essentially have like two possible fates that they can take. One of them is it gets, you know, purchased by a production company or a streaming service or what have you. This is my less preferred route, as it's going to come with restrictions. It's going to come with compromises that I have to make. The show's not going to be as pure as it should be, including all my future work, but it will allow me to make it full time, which is, you know, a sacrifice that I might be willing to make depending on, you know, where things go. The alternative route, and my preferred route, is that it gets funded by the people through services like Patreon. People can support on Patreon, and there's already a bunch of people supporting on Patreon, which has been absolutely amazing. There's cool perks on there. You get your name written on the animation and stuff. You get to see stuff early. That is the best way to go about it, because that means I get to have 100% creative freedom for the rest of time to make the shows exactly the way that I want them to be, without any form of like, you know, corporate finagling. I understand that this path is going to take a little bit longer and probably yield a little bit less of a profit in the long run, but I would much prefer to hold on to that dream that is achievable before I, you know, pull the trigger and sell the show, because, you know, I need to make some money here. I'm working like 90 hours a week over the course of my regular job and Skifters. Beginning to burn out a little bit. I'm super exhausted. I've essentially sacrificed any free time or like social life to be able to make Skifters and all of my projects, you know, what they are supposed to be. And I'm starting to run out of steam. At some point, something's gonna have to give, and I don't know what that looks like. So if you like the show, please support it on Patreon, because I want to keep making it. What's your favorite battle scene you've either already made or have planned thus far, if it's possible to share without spoiling anything? Alternatively, which Skifters character could speedrun 1 to 4 in Ultra Kill successfully? I don't know anything about Ultra Kill, but if we're talking about speedrunning a video game, my money's definitely on Flip. My favorite battle scene that I've either made or planned thus far? I haven't done a lot of combat in a long time, and I haven't done any combat yet for Skifters, with the exception of some of the stuff I've made for episode 2 coming up. I do have a scene planned for April. I had to do like a little bit of a test pose in Maya to make sure that it was attainable, where she essentially has like one leg on her handlebar and the other two on her sniper rifle. I'm really excited for that bit. It's going to be some cool poses. And I also have, you know, a couple cool things planned for episode 3, a couple really cool things planned for episode 4, but I don't want to spoil anything, so I'll keep that on lock for now. Are you going to hire animators? I do not plan on hiring animators. I don't plan on hiring anybody if I can help it. I can see a world where I work with like people making original music, original sounds, or working with more voice actors in the future, but I certainly don't want to hire anybody doing like visual aspects. I like to have all the creative control, and I'll always scale my projects, you know, to the limitations of what I can do as an individual, unless of course the show gets purchased and I kind of have to, you know, allocate some of that. But my ideal scenario is that I'm the only one touching the animation. What character dynamics are you most excited to showcase in Skifters' future? So far, we've just been dealing with Flip, Torque, and a little bit of April to kind of see where all of them are at. We're now introducing Max into episode 2. We're introducing Damper in episode 2. Torque and April's father, Idris, is also going to be getting a lot more involved. Everybody has their own reasons for being here, and those reasons are going to start to clash and grind against each other a little bit more as more characters get introduced and things get a little bit more fleshed out. There's some dynamics between some of the characters in episode 3 where things start to break down a little bit, and I'm really excited to see kind of how those emotions come across on screen, because things are going to get a little wacky. Without spoiling anything, I'm very excited for episode 3, and I hope you guys are too. What is the toughest thing you've had to animate / make? Back when I made Ace Soda, there's a scene where Emperor Zav grows gigantic and grabs a nearby planet and throws it at Emma's planet. That scene was really hard to animate. I definitely feel like I missed the mark as making that as explosive and like bombastic as I wanted to in my head. But I think that I kind of redeemed myself on this whole like giants growing into massive beings and fighting each other in Super Turbo Power Punch Max. I'm really happy with how those sequences turned out, despite them also being very difficult. What's a good motivation to not lose interest or get bored and distracted from an animation or modeling project? Believe it or not, I do get bored sometimes. Not every part of the process is super fun. That's just the way that creating something is. You're always going to have a favorite part and you're always going to have a least favorite part, and those are the moments where you get bored. If that happens to me, what I like to do is I like to live stream. I live stream on YouTube, and you know, people watch. That's great. It's more of like a way to kind of motivate me to focus on stuff when I don't want to do it. Sometimes you don't want to do it. That's just the way that it is. When that happens and somebody's watching you, it's a lot harder to like get distracted and go onto Twitter or Reddit and just kind of like doom scroll or whatever you want to do. It's hard to do those things when people are watching. Even if you're streaming and no one's watching, there's always the chance that like someone might watch, someone might tune in right now. I can't be sitting on Reddit like looking around. I can't be on TikTok on my phone. Like, people are here to watch me work. If you're too shy to do that, hop into Discord, hop into a Discord call, a Discord channel where your friends might be, and stream your screen, share your screen. They might pop in and say, hey, what's up? And see what you're working on. If you're sitting there on TikTok, you're gonna feel all anxious because it's like, I should be working. So do something to kind of like expose yourself to people around you to kind of help hold you accountable to get work done, especially when you don't want to. What motivated you to make Skifters, and did you have any trouble keeping motivation to work on it? How did you keep going? If so, coming from someone struggling to make their own indie project. Keeping motivation can be tough. I heard something from Bill Wirtz recently that I wish that I knew back when I started, which I definitely resonate with, and that is, if you're losing motivation, your project might be a little bit too big. Work on something smaller and go through all the steps of working on a project much more quickly. This is going to keep you motivated, and it's going to make you much better much quicker. Imagine if you take a year to make a project. You've spent one entire year going through all the steps from start to finish on how to make it. If you made the project a tenth of the size and you did a project that size every month, now over the course of a year, same amount of time, you've made 10 projects instead of one. You've done your storyboards 10 times, you've written 10 times, you've animated 10 times, you've produced 10 times, you've seen how people liked it and how people reacted 10 times in the same amount of time that it took you to do one thing. That makes you so much better, so much faster, and it's way more motivating to be like, oh, I only have like a week's left of work, rather than like, oh, I have like so much work left to do. It's ridiculous. Eventually, as you get better, you'll get quicker, your projects will get longer, respectfully with time. I know that it's hard to be like, why would I make a 1 month project that's gonna be really short? Why would I make a 10-second thing when I can make a 2-minute thing? I used to do that. I wish I didn't do that. No matter what you do, no matter how long your project is gonna be, you're gonna get better, and you're gonna look back and go, man, that stunk. I shouldn't have invested so much time into that. And keep iterating, keep getting faster, keep getting better, and keep having fun, because short projects are fun. If you're already locked into a big project, or you want to stick with a big project, I'm working on a big project. What I like to do is I like to make a big list of all the things that I have to do. In this list, I include all of the things that I've already done. So I'll make like a big thing in Notepad. I gotta write. I got a storyboard. I got to lay out my storyboard. I got to model torque. I got to rig torque. I got to model April. I got to rig April. I got to make the Nagaraboshi. I got to make the Hanzo Yari. Okay, now I have to start animating episode 1. I have to render episode 1. I have to do this. I have to do that. I have a giant list of things to do. And then I mark off all the stuff that I've already done. And now the list is half done. It's a stupid way to trick your brain to being like, look how far we've come, rather than writing a list of all the stuff you have to do and being like, I have so much to do. What's the point? You look at this list and you go, look at this giant list of things that I've already done. Let's keep rocking because I only have this much to go. A fun little way to trick your brain. It works for me to help me see how much I've already done and keep moving. There's probably a simple answer to this, but I'd like to hear it. What was the reason you chose to animate characters' speech on a slower speed while most everything else has tweening? There's a lot to unpack here. I didn't go to college. I didn't get taught practically on how to animate. I didn't really watch any tutorial series or anything. I just sat down in my software of choice and started figuring it out and just like trial and erroring it. That's the way that I've always done it, and that's the way that I'm going to continue to do it. So I don't know all the rules. I've learned some of the rules over time. Animating on 1s, you got to animate on 1s. If you're animating on 2s, you got to animate on 2s. If you're doing this, you want to do that. You want to get the squash and stretch. You want to get the anticipation. You want to get all that stuff. All that stuff is important. Of course, knowing the rules is a good thing. Once you know the rules, frick the rules. Don't pay attention to the rules. I don't care about the rules. I don't care about what like mechanically makes it look good. Telling you to not follow the rules is probably bad advice, but all that matters is that it looks good. I'm never gonna look at your animation and be like, but it wasn't on twos. The background is not following the thing. You flipped the line. You crossed the camera line. That kind of stuff. I don't care about that stuff. If your stuff flows and looks good, then I'm into it. What I do is I like things to be punchy, snappy, and flow at the same time. These are the three things that I like to do. Snappy is I want things to be quick. I want them to be bouncing from one thing to the other, which is how the characters talk. The characters are very snappy. I want things to be punchy, which does have a lot of anticipation. I want things to go like dramatically from one spot to the next spot in a very dramatic fashion. And I also want it to flow. I don't want you to be getting lost as to like, where are we now? Where's the camera now? I'm kind of getting confused. I don't know what's going on. So the background's all on ones. This keeps things flowing very nicely. It keeps them like very, like it keeps a lot of movement in the scene. It makes things feel very alive, and it's very rewarding to do rather than things kind of looking like a flip book because everything's snapping. I like it when the camera movements and all the background movements are on ones. So my camera's always moving on ones for the most part. Usually when I animate my characters talking, I want them to be very snappy. I don't obey listening to animating on ones or animating on threes. Sometimes I'm animating on a linear tangent where there's tweening and then it goes straight to being snappy and then it's an auto tangent. I don't care. I just want it to look good. So sometimes they'll be talking on twos and then they'll snap on a three and then they'll have like a linear bit. I've animated characters talking on ones before and I just find it very uninteresting. They're not really super expressive because they kind of like are matching like a real pacing of talking. That's not interesting to me. I'm here to make a cool cartoon. I care way more about style than I do substance. So I want things to be snappy. I want them to be punchy. A lot of my action sequences are also on twos or stepped tangents. I prefer to call them stepped tangents because they don't animate every 2 frames. I'm changing it up constantly. But those stepped tangents become closer together because I want those action sequences to flow. But they're still on step tangents so I can really quickly make something punchy if I need to. I hope that that'll make sense. That was a bit more of a complicated one. That is all the questions that I've picked out that I thought were really interesting to talk about. If you guys need me to clarify any of my answers in the comments, please let me know. If you have any more questions of stuff that you wanted me to go more in depth on maybe like how I do stuff or more like complicated artistic topics, ask me in the comments. Maybe we can do a round 2 if you guys enjoy it. Let me know what you think of this video. This is not the typical kind of content that I make, but I wanted to kind of just like interact and, you know, let you guys know a little bit more about like what I'm interested in and what I'm doing. And I hope that if there's any aspiring animators or artists in general watching, which I know there are some, I hope that you found this enlightening. So thanks for hearing me yap, and I will see you guys in episode 2 of Skifters very soon.